Friends, what's up? Welcome to Changing Tracks. Sitting with us on this train is Laura. Laura, how's it going?
Very good. How are you?
Well, I'm fine. Happy to be here with you. So let's start from the beginning, okay? Tell me a bit about where you're from, how old you are, if you grew up in a Catholic family or not. Talk to me.
Okay, so I'm from the United States. I'm from Virginia. I'm 24. I was born and raised Catholic, but my mom is Catholic, my dad is Russian Orthodox, and so we grew up in a family that was a little bit divided. So I grew up in a Catholic environment. We were Sunday Catholics. We went to Mass on Sundays. We said grace at meals, but aside from that, there wasn't really any, not a ton of talk about God. My mom did try, she taught us our prayers. We went to religious education, but in general, there just wasn't like a really big environment of like, a very Catholic environment at home. So yeah.
Okay, tell me a bit about your school life. Did you go to a Catholic grade school or a public school?
So I went to public school my whole life. From preschool until college, I was in I went to a secular university, at public school, and that I think it did me a lot of damage, because in public school, there's not a Catholic environment. It's just, you believe what you want, you say what you want, and there's no talk of God. And so I remember that was, recalling it now, it was really damaging for me because I just grew up in that environment. At Mass, I would hear one thing, and then I would be in school and I would hear other things from kids, from teachers, from everyone. And so it definitely hurt my faith a lot to be in that environment.
How would you define your teenage years? What I mean is, what were you set on doing your teens? You said a bit about how, despite going to public school and having a Catholic upbringing at home, but public school maybe didn't let you consolidate, right? That Catholic view.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, well, now define yourself in your teens. What was Laura like as a teen? What was she focused on? Or, I don't know, maybe on herself.
Yeah, so I was, as a child, growing up, I was quiet, very studious. I loved to read, I loved to draw, to write, very creative. I had a big imagination, and so that was kind of, in that environment of like public school, it was really formed in that sense of I had this great big imagination, and as a child, I was also very pure, and I think as I went through that environment, I lost a lot of that innocence, and I started to use that creativity and that imaginativity in ways that were not good, So I think so kind of, and I can't put all the blame on everyone else because it also depends on me, but yeah, there was that tendency in myself to always, I loved what was beautiful. I always loved what was beautiful, and I think that being in public school, you learn a certain way, you learn to think a certain way. There's certain ideologies that are put forth and that were presented to me as beautiful. And so as an adolescent, when I kind of latched on to that, and then little by little as I grew up, I started to lose more and more of my faith, going to middle school, going to high school, just kind of losing more and more innocence, each year by year, losing more faith year by year. I started to question things that the church taught, and so and by the time I went to college, I was completely different than when I started, as like a teenager.
Okay, did you go to college, Laura?
Yes.
You go to college. Okay, what is your life like? Maybe at some point you come back during college? Or does everything continue just the same?
No, there was at university when I went to college, everything just kind of got worse. I mean, I began to date, and so it was for me a time of freedom. I was out of my house. I was out of, my mom, she made us go to church every Sunday. That was the rule. We all went to Mass every Sunday. Thanks be to God that she made us all do that. But when I went to college, it was a very liberal college. It was very secular. There was no mention of God, and so I was able to give my own, at this time I had already distanced myself from the church a lot. I was able to express myself better in college because everyone else thought the same as me. I was more feminist, I was more liberal, and so I just found this environment. I was able to be myself, So it really just, there came a point in university where I remember I called my mom and I was like, I am not going to Mass anymore. I'm done with the church, I'm done with the doctrine, I'm done with the rules. And I'm just, I had begun to live a life in mortal sin. I was living in mortal sin. The church told me one thing that I couldn't, the church told me I couldn't live a certain way, and I didn't want to hear that. I wanted to do what I wanted to do because that was the ideology that I had taken on as my own. I want to do what I want to do. I want to be free. And if I'm attached to doctrine and to rules, then I can't be free. So and when I went to university, I completely lost my faith entirely.
Why did you consider that the faith was a bunch of rules, norms, and almost a whip in the hand? Why did you think that?
Well, because of the ideologies I had grown up with, because of the sins I started to commit, I found a lot of, and unfortunately, I found my fulfillment. I found my fulfillment in the things that in that other life, in those different sins I was committing. For somebody to tell me, for the church to tell me that I couldn't do something that I enjoyed doing, even if it was bad, for me was like a kind of a slap in the face. Like, you can't tell me what to do. If you really loved me, if you really accepted me and supported me, I would be able to do whatever I wanted to do. And so it was never to me presented as really like, it's not that anyone really taught me the faith in a way that was bad, that was like, that it's just, a bunch of rules or something, but I began to understand that myself because I just didn't want to have anyone, I didn't want to have anyone to tell me that what I was doing was wrong. I wanted to think that I was always doing the right thing. And so yeah, for me that was why I just kind of began to think that the church is just a bunch of rules, because every time I wanted to do something that I like to do, the church would tell me that I couldn't do it. And so I began to think, oh man, this is no fun. Like, this is no good, and I don't want to be a part of a church that is just telling me what to do all the time, and I can't be myself. I can't express myself, or you'll tell me that I'm going to hell if I do this thing or that thing, and that's just wrong. I can't have someone tell me I'm going to hell because that's mean. You can't tell people they're going to hell. This was really the way that I thought. So I just developed this very negative view of the church and the rules and the doctrine, and of course also fueled by the ideology. I mean, you think of the feminist ideology, it is, you can't tell me what to do, in certain aspects of life, because that is just wrong, to tell me I can't do something that I want to do. You're limiting my freedom. So I developed that idea of the church.
Okay, and amid all this dissolute behavior, all this rebellion of yours, and feminism, were you happy?
I thought so. I believed that I was happy. If somebody asked me if I was happy, I would have said, absolutely I'm happy. I'm happier than I've ever been because I don't have any of these rules, any of this dogma, and I've freed myself from the chains of the church, and now I'm actually, a free woman. But truly I was disturbed. I think I was really disturbed at what I was doing. And there were moments that I would kind of sit and think, well, where did that little girl go? I was so innocent. Where did that girl go? Why is this my life now? Why am I doing these things? I never did this before. I always was taught that this was bad to do. Why am I doing this? But those moments would pass by quickly. I would just try not to think about it because I didn't want to confront that part of what I was doing, because there's an ugly side, of course, So yeah, I believed I was happy, but there was that deep down where I was just very disturbed at the sins I was committing at the same time.
Laura, Where do you think everything changes? At what point or how?
Yeah, so I was a professed agnostic. I believed that there was a God. I didn't think that you could know what that God was, who that God was, because I just didn't think you could know. And so I had this very dark view of life. I thought that, well, we die, it all goes black, there's nothing else, and this world's the only place you have to make a change, to do good. I also had this tendency, I always wanted to do good for people, so I had, a career for me was everything, and I wanted to do something big with my life, big, big, big. And so I had all these ideas, all these careers lined up, I couldn't choose what to do. And I was in anguish because my whole life was a career. So, that was the only thing in my life that I could think that was important, was to have a career. So I prayed one day. I was in such, had no idea what to do, and I said a prayer, and I said, God, if you exist, can you show me what I can do that will do the most good? And that was that. And I hadn't, it was the first time I'd prayed in a very, very long time, but I was at the end of my rope. I had no idea what to do with my life. So weeks go by, and it's not answered. No prayer, no dove from the heavens descending, telling me, this is your answer, this is your career, nothing. So I thought, well, silly little prayer, of course, the Christian God doesn't exist, so that was just kind of a waste of your time. And then my 21st birthday came and went, and I remember shortly after that, I don't know how it happened, if it was but one day I just really wanted to learn about Saint Joan of Arc. That was I just remember just really wanting to learn about her for no reason, because I didn't have a devotion to a saint. I didn't think about the saints. The saints to me were not the type of, they weren't really my group of friends, you could say. So I just started to learn about her. I looked her up on the internet. I looked up her trials. I watched videos, I watched movies, I watched everything. For a week I was obsessed. And things in me started to change. As I read her trials, as I read her life, I started to see what real beauty was, the beauty I'd always been searching for, but I had never, I looked for it in all the wrong places, and I saw, she was totally given to God. She only wanted what God wanted. She was so pure, beautiful, truly beautiful person, and I just had never seen someone like that before, and it started to change things in me. I started to, my whole world kind of turned upside down in that one week. All my ideologies, everything, it was totally the grace of God, because I was very stubborn in my beliefs. I was very angry. If you corrected me, I was very angry. You can't say that to me. What I believe is always right. And so for her to change, for the Lord to use her to change me, was a huge, that I was even open to listening was a huge grace. So anyways, at the end of that week, I was so confused, because I had never, I don't know, I just never experienced something like that before. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, and I couldn't. And so I had a moment. I knelt down on the floor of my room, and I said, Lord, what's happening to me? Is this you? Are you doing this? Or is this you actually doing? Are you doing something? And I just remember hearing the Lord speak to me for the first time in my heart, and I had never experienced that before. And I remember that he said to me, I did not create you to live like this. You're living like an animal without God, and that he had sent me, Saint Joan of Arc, yes, because I had to be like her, but also because he wanted me to be a saint too. And then at the end of that, he said to me, go to confession, receive Holy Communion, and we'll talk again. And at this time in my life, I did not know what a spiritual director was, what grace was, what the spiritual life was, none of that. I just knew that the Lord had told me something and I needed to obey. And so I did. And that was, for me, the turning point of everything.
Laura, earlier you mentioned that you were agnostic. Why? Why did you want to be agnostic? Why didn't you believe in a specific God?
Because it was easy to be agnostic. To be atheist is to really have to I believe that there is no God. And I saw the world, and there was something about the creation that spoke to me that said, there's something intelligent behind all of this. The fact, just the beauty of everything told me that there was some creator, there was some design to everything. But I didn't, I guess I'd always grown up with the Christian God, and I had never the Catholic God, rather, and Once I stopped believing in that, and that was, I remember even being, when I was Catholic, when I was practicing and thinking I would never be Muslim, because it didn't make sense to me. I know I looked at the way that they believed and it didn't make any sense to me, and I thought, well, if it's not Catholicism, then it's probably nothing at all. So yeah, just looking at all the different religions and just kind of one by one thinking, no, it couldn't be that. I thought my most likely bet was Catholicism. Sounds kind of my most likely bet, but I thought maybe if it wasn't Catholicism, wasn't anything. And it was also easy because it means that I can say, oh yeah, there's a God, but I don't have to be specific. I don't have to really attach myself to a set of rules, to a set of beliefs. I can just kind of believe whatever I want, and there's a God, and and it's just easy. It's just kind of it's an easy way to kind of look at the world, I guess.
Okay, besides St. Joan of Arc, how do you link your life back to Catholicism? I mean, for people who are watching. I don't know how to do that. Do I have to read a book? Do I have to watch a video? Do I have to learn about St. Joan of Arc? Do I have to join a parish group? Do I have to join a community? What do I have to do? Besides what you told us earlier, how do you link your life back to the faith?
Make a good confession. Make a good examination of conscience and make a good confession. Because if you don't have, if you are not disposed to hear the voice of the Lord speaks through a variety of things. He speaks to us in videos and in groups, prayer groups at church, whatever, homilies. In every little circumstance of life, the Lord speaks to us. But if we don't have that clean slate, if we are still attached to certain things that are keeping us from listening to his voice, he's not going to, he can reach us. He reached me. It's not impossible, but it makes it a lot harder for the Lord to work. So I would say first, make a good confession and really intend to have an open disposition before the Lord, like whatever you want, whatever you tell me, I'm listening. And I want to. I want to do what you want me to do. And then from there, obviously, Mass is so important. Daily Mass, if you can. Daily Mass is so important. To be able to receive the Eucharist every day is a privilege. It's a blessing. You have the life of Christ in your soul. It's incredible. So, in that sense, just starting from there. But those are basics. And I think from there, then you begin to find books and you begin to find groups of prayer groups, and you begin to find other things, but the most important is just to begin, at the source of everything, and confession, Holy Communion.
Okay, so you named obstacles to hear God's voice. Something kept you from hearing God's voice. I don't know, regarding you or this experience you've told to other people. What do you think is what prevents us from hearing God's voice?
Selfishness. Selfishness is a horrible, horrible monster it's just because it impedes us from hearing the voice of the Lord, I think, because we have this conception of how we want things to be. And we're very reluctant to give up our own plans and our own desires to be able to let him speak to us of what he wants from us. So I would say selfishness for sure. It's just, there's no space for it. The saints were always very generous with the Lord. There's no such thing as a selfish saint, So I would say first, rid yourself of all the selfishness, all the plans, all your ways of doing things, of how you want things to be, and just let the Lord do what he wants to do and rearrange what he wants to rearrange in your soul.
What role does the Virgin Mary play in this whole conversion?
A huge role. She had a huge role. Because I'm going to backtrack a little bit. While I was really living in mortal sin, I had this experience that later I realized that it was a big grace from the Lord, but at the time it was just, to me, terrifying. I remember one day, it's just like one of those graces, I know where I was, what I was doing, everything. I was at my house, and I just felt I was going to hell. I knew it with a certainty that I was going to hell. And it scared me. And it scared me really bad because I knew, I had been well catechized. I knew what a mortal sin was. I knew that I was committing mortal sin, and I didn't care. I didn't care enough because I was selfish and I wanted to live my life the way I wanted to do it. So I knew very well that I was going to hell because of these sins, but it just came over me all of a sudden. It's just this knowledge. And I was crying, and my parents were like, why are you crying? And I was like, I don't want to tell you why I'm crying. I just know that I'm going to hell, and they were very disturbed, and I was very disturbed. And it was one of those moments that I was presented with a choice, really, or I change and I save my soul, or I don't change my manner of life and I'm going to hell. And I knew I had those two decisions. And I chose to continue to live my life the way I was. And from that moment on, I tried to forget about that moment, and I didn't think about it for years. I had my conversion, and after that, I was thinking to myself one day, well, why did I have a conversion? If the Lord had given me this grace of knowing that I was going to hell because of the sins I was committing, and I still chose to reject Him, why did I ever receive the grace of conversion in the first place? And one day I was in prayer, and I was reading a particular book, and I just remember realizing that Our Lady had saved me, that she was the one that had begged for my life before the Lord, because He in His justice was in His justice. I had put myself in hell, essentially, by my actions, but Our Lady, like a good mother, had begged for my life, and through her intercession and through the intercession of Saint Joan of Arc, that I had received that grace of conversion. And after that, when I had my conversion, I was like, oh, Mary, Mary, she's nice, she's the queen, she's, all of this. And I had an affection for her, but I didn't understand her role as like my mother, like a mother who loves me and cares for me. And after that, my relationship with Our Lady changed a lot, because I realized that she desired my salvation and that she saved my life, Well, our Lord did, but of course she played a very big role in that, so.
Laura, for those who are watching or listening, what advice, what word, what quote would you say? They need to go to the Lord. There are people who watch this program in an effort to grow closer to God. It's all yours. What would you say?
Well, it's nothing new, I have to say. But the one thing I would say is you're not going to be happy any other way. There is no other way that you're going to be happy. You're going to look for happiness everywhere else. You're not going to find it. You're going to try to I don't know where you're going to try to find it, but you're going to do what I did, and you're going to look for it in a million different places. And until you come and you realize that the Lord is your only happiness, His will is your peace, His will is your happiness, until you realize that, you're just going to be searching and searching and searching, but in the Lord is where we find our peace. That is the only thing I could say. He is our joy. He is everything. The things of this world don't satisfy the heart. That's what St. Augustine, my heart is restless until it rests in thee. It's true. It's very simple, but that's the only thing that comes to mind is just, just let Him be everything for you. He wants to be everything for you. Just let Him be everything. He loves you. He's like a beggar outside the door of your heart. He's just waiting for you to just open the door and let Him in and let Him reign. Give Him full control. Don't hold anything back. You don't look for love anywhere else, because you're not going to find it.
Laura, thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Thanks.
Thank you, to you as well.
Friends, we are living in a society that seeks to cover needs. God covers those needs. Sometimes we don't believe that, and we don't believe it because we don't know Him. Maybe we ought to start getting to know God through good confession, through a good movement, through a reference, a parish, something. But know that He will cover those needs we in the world try to cover other ways. Thank you. Thanks for being here with us today.